the Earth, 400 million years ago. Another 150 million years will still have to go by before the first dinosaurs appear. For the time being, the land that has emerged from the sea belongs to the plants and a few odd animals, almost all of them quite small. The biggest dragonflies are no bigger than 70 centimeters or 27 inches. They're covered with an extraordinary exoskeleton. This is a new biological invention, a tough and marvelously versatile cuticle. It can be impermeable in land species, or permeable in order to be able to breathe underwater. It can be heavy and strong to withstand impacts, or light to be able to float or fly. It's rigid, but can be flexible enough for a butterfly's proboscis or for the articulations of the legs and wings, which sometimes beat 1,000 times per second. It's a revolutionary lineage, the insects. These orchids imitate the shape, smell, and color of a bumblebee. The success of these flowers in their attempt to reproduce depends on their strange beauty. It depends on how similar they look to the females of each species. If their disguise is perfect, they will attract a male bumblebee that will arrive loaded with pollen in a yellow mustache that doesn't belong to the orchid plant. They are the pollinia of another flower from another plant with which the orchid will sexually cross its genes. The insect lands on the orchid, and while it tries fruitlessly to mate, it is tricked into fertilizing the flower. It's a relationship based on a lie, but both the insect and the plant benefit from it. The relationship between plants and animals has produced some inseparable allies, true best friends forever. This is a case of lodgings in exchange for protection. The novateiro, or novice tree, is widely distributed throughout Brazil's Mato Grosso wetlands. It owes its success at colonizing new areas in large part to some ants, a kind of stinging ant known locally as the formiga novateira. Of course, the names are so similar because wherever there's a novateiro tree, there are novateira ants. And here, everybody keeps that very much in mind. If anyone approaches the tree and tries to eat its leaves, or just simply touches it, they're attacked by a furious army of innumerable ants whose sting is very painful, and even dangerous if the victim is bitten many times. Insects and plants maintain long and fruitful relationships in which they depend on each other. Relationships on which the rest of us living beings depend too. Without insects, there would be no plants, nor any of the life that we know today. The coevolution between plants and insects goes back at least 100 million years. During that time, countless adaptations and species have emerged in both kingdoms, which certainly live parallel lives. The pollination carried out by insects around the world is a crucial ecosystemic service, which of course also includes human agriculture and is valued at more than $100 billion a year. So yes, we also depend on insects. Nonetheless, not everything about insects is beneficial. Practically any part of a plant serves them as food. From the roots to the leaves. But how is balance maintained? Who controls the insects? Why don't terrible plagues of insects wipe out everything? Unfortunately for insects, they are the most important source of nutrients of all, the main nutritional resource of everything that eats animal proteins. Although a very high degree of specialization is required to catch them. Reptiles and amphibians are insect super predators. This toad is patrolling the edges of his habitual hunting grounds. There's no food left around here, so the amphibian will have to risk going a little farther. Summer is coming to an end. Nonetheless, it's still very hot. These grasshoppers live in areas of dry granite sand, and their color is identical to that of the soil they walk and jump on. They look like they were painted with quartz, feldspar, and mica. Amongst themselves, they see each other when they move their legs and signal to each other, but if they stay still, they're invisible. When they detect a potential enemy, they stay very still. They trust their camouflage. Jumping is only their last resort, because it's risky. This grasshopper hadn't noticed the danger, and moving almost cost it its life. But when it jumped, it spread its bright blue wings, which are a warning sign for the rest of the grasshoppers around it. And they react by jumping too. It's hard to catch insects, but in spite of that, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals survive because they eat insects. although the main consumers of insects are other insects. Sometimes the demands involved in stalking their prey have forced them to develop unimaginable shapes and lifestyles. The whole body and behavior of antlion larvae have evolved to give rise to a strange being whose way of hunting is quite disturbing and almost perfect. Now it's looking for the right spot, someplace with very fine sandy soil that is as protected from the rain as possible. It needs to set up shop in a place that insects pass through, and an ant crossroads would be ideal. Moving backwards in a spiral that gets smaller and smaller, it tosses up small piles of grains of sand, using its head and jaws like a shovel. The final result is an inverted cone up to 10 centimeters across and about 5 centimeters deep, depending on the size of the larva. When it's finished, it opens its jaws and disappears. This is both its home and a trap where nobody sees it. It will wait, stock still, invisible, for careless ants to fall down the steep slope that it has dug out. When it recognizes the vibrations of the legs of something the right size that is trying to escape up the slippery slope, it throws up more sand, like when it was building the trap. That's how it makes its prey slide down to where it is buried and waiting, ready to pounce. And at the right moment, it attacks. It injects a paralyzing poison and digestive enzymes that dissolve its prey's internal organs, and it drinks the resulting fluid, right down to the last drop, making the most of each victim. Some 30 minutes later, all that's left is the part that it can't eat, the empty shell of chitin, and the antlion larva throws it as far away as possible so as not to give away its position, and so it won't get in the way of catching its next meal. The antlion lion larva may seem like an overly complex caprice of evolution, but part of its strategy is shared by many insects. The strategy of the young being very different from the adults. Separating life in the larval phase from life in the mature phase offers big advantages. If the offspring eat something different from what their parents eat, then they don't compete with them for resources, and they all have a greater chance to survive. And if they even live in different ecosystems, so much the better. These are mosquito larvae, which are aquatic and filter the water. They're nothing like their mothers or fathers. The nymphs eat underwater until they're ready, and only then do they embark on their journey into another world with a very different body. Adult male and female mosquitoes don't even compete for food between each other. The males feed on the nectar of flowers, while the females drink the nectar of everybody else. Yes, only female mosquitoes suck blood. Although, more than a survival strategy, it's a matter of necessity. With the proteins that they steal from us vertebrates, they can make more eggs and reproduce more prolifically. Many insects have chosen the evolutionary path of metamorphosis. The spectacular change that caterpillars undergo to become butterflies radically divides their larval phase, the feeding and developmental stage, from their adult phase, the reproductive stage. With this division, this order of animals ensures itself the best adaptive tools to survive each of its biological phases. A butterfly's wings give it an identity and beauty. But above all, it endows it with the chance to conquer new territories and spread out over the land. Going unnoticed is a behavior practiced by almost all species. Whether vertebrates or invertebrates. but a few are real masters of the art of going unseen. There are two secrets to their success: a good disguise and the ability to remain absolutely immobile for hours or even days. The largest living insect that we know of belongs to the phasmid family, a stick insect on the island of Borneo, which holds the record for size with a length of 55 centimeters. Only the dragonflies of the Devonian period were bigger. Stick insects and leaf insects can allow themselves to grow so large today because not even at this size do they draw attention to themselves and their environment. Good camouflage keeps predators from locating them. But how do they find a mate if he or she looks like every other twig in the landscape? Worse yet, how can they be sure they don't make a mistake? Phasmids, like most insects, perceive the presence of their mates very clearly thanks to pheromones, which are specific chemical substances that only they recognize and understand. The pheromone that the female releases makes her visible to males even several miles away, even though she continues to be invisible to everyone else around her. The evolutionary adaptations that these strange insects have developed to go unnoticed are marvelous. But even more surprising is the ability that the males have developed to ensure the success of their genes. Before mating, many insects clean the female's vagina in an attempt to eliminate the sperm from a previous suitor. To ensure that they are the fathers of any offspring, the males of some species in this family of insects have opted for staying latched to the female in the mating position throughout the whole time she needs to develop her eggs. Fortunately, the process to develop a fertilized egg lasts only a few days, at most a couple of weeks. Once that period is ended, the male unplugs himself from the female, which almost immediately lays its eggs. Each egg is identical to the seeds of the plant on which the mother lives. And so, with a little luck, when it falls to the ground, some ants may think that it's something to add to their pantry and will carry it back to their nest, where it can hatch safely. The newborn stick insect, camouflaged by the scent of the ants, can then safely look for its own plant. Of course, not all insects copulate for 15 days. There's a whole range of behaviors. But in point of fact, insects often mate for a very short time, even on a human scale. Some insects copulate for only a few seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. And she's fertilized for life. Sometimes they even copulate while flying, in the air. Dragonflies are very agile and quick. The ability of their two pairs of wings to move by rotating on their point of insertion allows dragonflies to make seemingly impossible maneuvers in the 3 dimensions of space. And they can even do that in tandem. The couple is able to fly in perfect synchronization because only the female decides on the direction, orientation, and altitude of their flight at all times. The male dragonfly just takes care of fertilizing his mate and lets himself be led up, down, right, or left, following the rhythm of the dance. The competition is fierce among the males of some species. In addition, among stag beetles, for example, there seems to be a huge disproportion in the numbers of males and females. There are very few females, so the struggle to get one is crucial, and therefore violent. When two rivals feel equally strong and neither backs off, they each try to throw the other one out. They rarely hurt each other, as their weapons are designed to minimize the damage. They have branches to avoid touching the other's body, although some do die sometimes. The winner keeps a territory that the females will approach in search of the best beetle. Although it must appear as if he is pursuing her. That's the right thing. Ladybugs are also beetles, but they don't have any horns. They're not fighters, at least not in a sexual context. There's no great rivalry among the males for territory. They're a light kind of beetle, and flying away doesn't represent a big blow to their egos, nor does it imply consuming much energy. So the most practical thing is to flee and look for another place with other females. There are lots of them. Even when two males have set their eyes on the same female, the issue is settled on top of her without violence. It's more a question of balance. Among this other type of beetle, reproductive success is a matter of ball handling skills. Balls of dung, that is. Making the dung balls isn't the hardest part. Transporting them is even more complicated. The ground is full of potholes and obstacles. But without a doubt, the most difficult thing of all is to keep the balls between their legs. Whoever wins the game buries the ball and lays an egg on top of it so that its offspring will have enough food until it reaches adulthood. The order of the beetles is the one that has achieved the greatest success in the history of the planet. Not counting extinct species, today there are more than 300,000 species of Coleoptera, while there are barely 20,000 species of fish and 10,000 birds. We mammals number only 5,000. Which is nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands of beetle species. Only another kind of insect, the butterflies, come close to the beetles in variety. There are some 100,000 butterflies. Ants aren't as diverse, but they are much more numerous than beetles and butterflies. Every corner of the earth is home to trillions of ants. It's been estimated that all the ants together weigh as much as all humanity. There are some 250,000 ants on Earth for each person. But their number isn't as important as their industriousness, since their activities have a crucial effect on almost every ecosystem. Ants are carcass collectors, pollinators, and even hunters. And their underground constructions help to aerate the subsoil. Aphids may be even more numerous than ants, and they are certainly more prolific. What's more, aphids and ants are allies. The two species live in symbiosis. The ants look after the aphids and protect them in exchange for food. On their part, the aphids secrete a high-energy, sugary substance. It's a waste product for aphids, but many species of ants base their diet mainly on this molasses that they get from their aphid partners. One curious aspect of this relationship is that not just any ant can drop by and serve himself as much as he wants. There are usually only 2 or 3 ants that are in charge of dispensing the aphid's juice. And they dole it out to their colleagues with a very sweet kiss. This prevents ants from other ant nests from taking advantage of herds of aphids that aren't their own. What we still don't understand is why the aphids refuse to give out a ration of the juice if it isn't being harvested by the ant that they recognize as their distributor. In reality, we know very little about nature, although we do know that ants are very well organized. They have a social structure arranged in castes. According to this social structure, some ants search for food, and others work to enlarge the nest, while certain groups spend their time taking care of the larvae in the nest. Nearby, in the deepest and best hidden chamber, the queen keeps laying eggs to expand her colony and her power. Their endurance is almost limitless, and their strength is amazing. An ant can lift an object that weighs up to 20 times its own body weight. Grain by grain, the ant colony moves significant quantities of earth, enough to help oxygenate and enrich the soil. Their enormous and intricate nests sometimes extend as much as 5 meters below the surface. There is one kind of ant, however, that does not dig nests. Let's just say that more than architects, army ants are civil engineers that build roads, bridges, and tunnels. Most of the year, they are nomadic, footloose travelers whose home is wherever their journey takes them. They grip each other's legs with their mandibles, creating walls made up of their own bodies. Inside, the queen and the larvae sleep safe and sound, protected by a throng of between 2 and 3 million workers and soldiers. Sometimes the portable ant's nest stays in the same location for a few days if the area is rich in resources or if it is egg-laying time. As the eggs are very fragile and hard to transport. But now the new generation is in the larval stage. And so each new dawn, the whole colony hits the road again. The farther they can travel each day, the greater their chances to find food or a safe spot to nest. With this objective in mind, the workers that run into an obstacle gather together over it, linking to each other, forming a sort of rug that keeps their colleagues from having to make short detours. This can be especially convenient for the ants that are carrying nymphs. But above all, it helps the whole colony to maintain a constant pace. For army ants, finding shortcuts, avoiding going around a branch, or getting over a hole or puddle is essential. Thanks to the little bridges and catwalks that their brothers lay down beneath their feet, army ants almost always march in a straight line. without having to overcome the thousands of obstacles lying on the chaotic ground of the jungle individually. In this way, each day they manage to cover 2 or 3 times the distance that they would otherwise. Ant colonies have evolved to incredible extremes. Some species even capture others and turn them into slaves that have to work for them until they die. Nonetheless, however highly evolved ants may seem to us, they weren't the first to discover the advantages of living in society. Millions of years earlier, termites had already forged the links that lead to adopting a social way of life to survive. Termites are often confused with ants, but in reality, they don't even look like each other. Ants have a wasp-like waist, while termites are chubby and don't have any waist at all. The two lineages belong to very different orders of insects that are evolutionarily quite separate. Although they are similar in that they're both small, numerous, and almost always live underground. Termites are really photophobic and don't expose themselves to sunlight unless it's an absolute emergency. And they certainly never go out in columns like ants to scout or look for supplies. Termites eat only plant matter, normally fungi that they grow themselves. What ants and termites do share is the custom of living all together in big numbers in enormous houses that they have built themselves. Termite mounds are made of mud and processed feces or saliva. And they have a unique characteristic in that instead of being underground, a major part of them is above ground. More than anything else, this offers big advantages in regulating the temperature inside the nest. The needs of termites to control the temperature, aeration, and humidity are very strict because of the fungi that they grow. And so termites are forced to open and close air passages almost constantly to increase or reduce the air currents. Their precision in controlling the environment in their fungi farms and nests is similar to human precision, except they don't need electronics, nor do they produce any pollution. In addition to termites and ants, wasps and bees also live within a social structure in which individual insects are differentiated depending on the role they play in the colony. Wasps are the ancestors of ants, and their cities are somewhat less complex. Their nests are usually smaller and normally have only 2 castes, the reproductive class and the working class. But the kings and queens are also workers. Over time, they have evolved and traded digging tunnels for geometry. The building material of wasps is paper that they manufacture by processing wood with their saliva. Bees live in a society that has been super perfected. Like their home, the beehive. They build with the same six-sided geometric figure as wasps, the hexagon, which is a more durable construction that makes better use of the available space. But bees use wax instead of paper. But that's because bees have to store honey. With the wax, they make up to 7 different types of antibiotics. And so the walls of their homes are not only clean, but also disinfected. Not a single bacterium can live in a beehive. One of the most positive aspects of living in society is that one's individual mistakes when building or taking care of the young don't have serious consequences for the colony. That would be fatal for a solitary insect. But here, it is the group as a whole, and not the individual, that tackles each task. Compared to the majority of living beings, the social insects are probably the creatures which, thanks to their evolutionary adaptations, have the best chance to survive over time. We can only hope that, like living in society, this is something we humans share with them. The supremacy of the six-legged animals is overwhelming. Each year, we discover 7,000 new species of insect. Up to now, we have identified more than 1 million species. But some scientists think there may be as many as 80 million species. Perhaps the most realistic figure is some 5 million different insects. 5 million different ways of being born, eating, communicating, building, finding mates, and hunting. Many people think this is the age of man, or of mammals, just as the Mesozoic era was the age of the dinosaurs. But that is a big mistake and a surfeit of pride. We have always lived in the age of insects. Insects rule the earth.